Obviously a new year calls for a new reading journal, so here we are again. I think this is my third year creating a yearly reading journal, but only my second time filming it. I'll leave last year's video down below if you want to see it, but I'm also going to show you last year's journal later in this video, all filled out just so you can see how I use my spreads, and also I'm going to discuss which spreads I loved, which ones I didn't choose to do again this year, all of that sort of stuff. And also just a quick note to say that I get a lot of my inspiration from Pinterest, so I'm not claiming that these are all original ideas because they're definitely not, but I hope you guys enjoy seeing my spreads for my 2024 reading journal. As always, I'm just starting off with the title page. I'm pretty sure I got the inspiration for this one from Pinterest. Next up, I'm creating a spread to track my amount of books read. So my reading goal for this year is 100 books, and usually I just do like little squares that I color in, but this year I decided to make it look like a little bookshelf, which I think turned out pretty cute. So every time I finish a book, I'll just color in one of these books. And I think this idea came from Destiny, having like a different color for each month, so you can see like, oh, all the yellow books I read in January, all of the pink books I read in October, whatever it may be, just as a bit of a visual representation. And I feel like this will be one of those spreads that is so satisfying to look back on. Next up, we just have my reading log. I do this every single year. This is kind of like the main way that I track my books. So every time I finish a book, I write down the title, the author, the genre, the amount of pages, and my star rating. And I've definitely mentioned this before, but I'm not the best at using Goodreads. I kind of forget to log my books on there, but I never forget to log my books in my reading journal. So this is kind of like the main way I track my books. And if I ever need to look back on what I've read earlier in the year for any sort of video or any sort of record at all, this is where I go because it just has the most accurate information. And I only film myself creating one of these spreads, but I actually made two and left space for a third one just in case, because it's really hard to tell how many books you're going to read each year. I call this my hopeful spread, which is just books that aren't necessarily on my TBR, but I'm hopeful that I'll get to. Next up, we have my anticipated releases page. I feel like this is kind of self-explanatory. I just like to write down my most anticipated releases and which date they're coming out, and then after I read them, I print out a little book cover that I glue in here. So again, this one will look a lot more satisfying at the end of the year. And last year I only did one of these spreads, but I ran out of space, so I created two this year. Moving on, this is something fun that I'm doing for the first time this year, and it is a book club spread. So I have a little block for each month. I'm going to print out a photo of the book that we are reading in my little book club that I have with my friends, and then I'll write a few notes about it, maybe write down my rating and the other girls' ratings, and I feel like it'll be really fun to look back on this at the end of the year. Next up, we have another spread that I did last year and really enjoyed. I actually only did one page last year, but I decided to make it into a double spread this year because it was just so much fun and I wanted to do a bigger version of it. I call it my reading bucket list, but it's basically where I just make a bunch of squares, and on each square is some sort of like, almost like a prompt, I guess. And every time I read a book that matches that prompt, I can color in that box. And obviously the goal is to color in every box. And last year I did color in every box that I had created, so that's why I decided to make it a little bit bigger this year. It's almost just like a fun little game or challenge or something, and you can kind of suit it to whatever your reading preferences are. And I can't wait to see how colorful this spread is by the end of the year. Then we have the 24 books I want to read in 2024. This is like my official yearly TBR, another one that I do every single year, and I really loved how I did the spread last year, so I pretty much just like recreated it. Another one that will definitely look a lot more fun at the end of the year, I actually show you in this clip a little bit later, my last year's spread compared to this year, just so you can get an idea of what it will look like. And I also have a whole video going in depth about which books I want to read in 2024, so I'll link that down below for you guys if you're interested. Here you guys can see the difference between what it looks like at the end of the year versus the start of the year. Obviously it's going to get a lot more colorful as the year progresses. Next, I decided to create a spread for all of the rereads that I do this year. I have been really enjoying doing rereads, and I definitely want to do more of them in 2024. I haven't worked out how I want to structure this page, so that's why it's kind of just like blank and just a border, but I think it turned out cute. Moving on, this is my non-fiction TBR and non-fiction like read page, which was super simple, just a little purple border, but again, I really like how this turned out. Okay, this next clip is an awful angle, I really apologize, but I do not know how people get good angles of them filming videos like this. I always find the filming of these videos literally so difficult. But anyway, this is me creating my genre tracker and my like monthly tracker. So I just created some fun borders using some colored cardboard, and I'm kind of just recreating almost exactly what I did last year for these spreads because they were so useful and I definitely looked back on them a lot. So these pages are just for tracking how many romance books I read, how many fantasy books I read, etc for each genre, and then on the other page I just track exactly how many books I read each month. So it will kind of end up looking like a column graph. Again, I'll show you later in this video what last year's spread ended up looking like. And if nothing else, it's just interesting. I love tracking reading data. I don't know why. I find like reading and like book statistics just absolutely fascinating. So this is just a really simple and easy way to kind of track numerical stuff like this. Now that you guys have seen me like setting up some of the spreads, I thought I would take you through an actual flip through of my completed journal, at least the completed setup. Obviously, none of the spreads are filled in yet. And although I did film a lot of my setup, I didn't show you all the spreads. So obviously I'll show you all of them now and also show you the order in which they are laid out, because even though I filmed me doing the setup, that wasn't the actual order that they were in. That was just the order that I like created them, if that makes sense. But let's get into it. Also, this is my journal for this year. I love the gold foiling. I'll link it down below. It's just from Amazon. Obviously, we just have the classic title page, nothing too crazy here. Also, the reason why I picked this journal, aside from it being so beautiful, is because it has really thick paper. I think it's like 160 GSM, but forgive me if I'm wrong. I'll try and link below some of my favorite stationery supplies, and I might show you some of them in a bit as well. But obviously, we have the title page, and then we have my reading goal that I showed you. I intentionally left this page blank in case I read more than 100 books, because then I can kind of like recreate this spread over the other side and probably just continue it. And I also have this little key of all the colors that I'm going to use. So all of the books that I read in January are going to be colored in this like light pink color, and so on and so forth. And I thought as I was showing you the completed spreads, I would also show you what I did last year. So like the equivalent spread from 2023, if there is one, because there's not always. So this is the equivalent spread from last year, just little squares. But I think the books are a lot more fun. Next up, we have my reading log. So this is just the same thing on 2 different spreads, and I've left the third one free in case I need to create another one, because last year I didn't leave myself enough space. And I mean, this one looks very similar, but you can see what it looks like filled out. There is a little bit of difference between the two, but it's mostly the same. Then we have my monthly tracker and genre tracker. So like I said, this is what it's going to look like when it's all filled out. So this is my monthly tracker from last year. Obviously this one is empty. I used a different color for each month, and you can see like which months I read more, which ones I read less. And then over here we have the genre tracker, which you can see I read a lot more romance and fantasy than anything else. And then the blue in this one is other fiction. I've actually changed like the, what would you call this? The orientation. This one's like a vertical bar graph, and I'm going to do a horizontal one this year, but we'll see how it goes. I already kind of showed you this one, but it is very, very similar from last year to this year. But this is just my 2024 TBR, and I can't wait to see it with some more color on it. This is what my hopefuls looked like last year, so very different this year. This one's so much more fun. Then we have my new releases page. So this one started out very similar to this one. It just started off pretty much blank, and then obviously I filled it out as I read the books, which is hopefully what this one will look like as the year progresses. Like I mentioned, I have one spread from January to June, and then another from July to December, because I ran out of space on this one. And I also have already printed and cut out all of my anticipated releases, so I can just stick them in straight away once I have read them, which will just make my life a little bit easier later on. Then we have my reading bucket list. So like I mentioned, I only did one page for this last year, but this year I've made it into a double spread, which I'm really excited about. Last year I completed everything on my bucket list, but this year I've literally doubled it, so we'll see how I go. And I've decided not to do my A to Z challenge this year, because I've done it for a couple years now and I never quite complete it, because there's always like 1 or 2 letters that I don't get to, and I'm just over it. So I decided not to do it this year. Then we have my series tracker. You know what? I actually think I prefer how I did it in my old journal compared to my new journal. It's very, very similar because I love this format. It works really well for me, so I just wanted to kind of do the same thing. But I wish I did rounded edges because I feel like it just looked better. So that's my mistake, but it's really not that big of a deal. And then I think I've also just like left some more space for this one to continue, because I'm sure there'll be more series that I start reading this year. This is what my rereads looked like last year. This is what it looks like this year. I gave myself a lot more space this year. Like I mentioned, I haven't decided how I'm gonna like structure this or how I'm gonna record it. I might do it the same as what I've done here, where I just wrote the title and the day that I read it or completed reading it, or I might do something different. We'll see. This is what my nonfiction TBR looked like last year. This is what it looks like this year, or at least this page is my TBR page, and this is where I'll write the books that I actually read, or the non-fiction books that I actually read. And as you can see here, last year I did a DNF graveyard, but I genuinely just didn't keep up with it, so I decided to can it and not do it in 2024. These are my spreads for my library reads and like documenting how many books I read from the library. Honestly, last year again is kind of more fun, but I might add something to this page. I haven't decided yet because I barely filled this out at all because I just didn't read that much from the library last year. I listened to a lot of audiobooks from the library, but I didn't write them down, which is just silly, so I need to document that better this year. But I do like the little library card that I added in here, like a little pretend library card. I think it's really cute. Then we have all of my Kindle reads. Last year I made it look like a little bookshelf. This year I'm just going to glue in little pictures of the front of the book just to switch it up. No like real reason why I changed this, I just felt like it, honestly. Then we have Hall of Fame. One thing that I don't love about this year's spread is you can like see where the glue was. I also like, I don't know how well you can see it, but all of those little pieces of glitter are stars, and I thought this would be cute because Hall of Fame is where I write down all of my like 4.5, 4.75 and 5-star reads, and I will say glitter is already falling off, so that is not fun and probably not my best idea, but it looks cute, and it was cute in theory. But yeah, the glue situation, not cute. The glitter, however, very cute. I think the reason why I didn't recreate this is because, well, first of all, I'm just going to use these little cover photos to glue straight on here rather than writing it down like a list. And also some months I read like 5-star reads, and then the next month I won't have a single 5-star read, so it felt like a bit silly to be like my favorite book from each month, because some months I just had way better reading months than others. So I feel like Hall of Fame is just a better way to document it as a whole. Okay, this spread is something completely new for me. So what I've done is I have drawn a TBR card, and then I wrote all of the books that are like left over on my TBR from 2023. So I want to see how many of these I read this year, and hopefully we are not going to start next year with these books on my TBR card. Hopefully I will like prioritize these and get through them rather than prioritizing like newer books that I buy. And I'm also going to create a little bookshelf here, so I'll draw little books, kind of like what we did earlier, like this. I'll draw little books every time I purchase a new book so that I'm keeping track of how many I'm buying, and I can just like have a visual representation of how many books I buy a year, because I just think it would be very interesting to track that. Okay, and here we have my physical TBR. I kept this very similar. So last year what I did was write down every single book that I owned, and all of the highlighted ones are the ones that I have read. All of the ones that are not highlighted are the ones that I obviously have not read. Whereas this year, I only wrote down the ones that I am starting the year that I haven't read. So this is like my entire physical TBR. All of these books are books that I own that I have not read yet. But I do have space to write down more as I do shopping throughout the year. I do think I created too many pages for this spread, but I mean, it's better to have too many than not enough, you know what I mean? Next up, we have my monthly statistics spread. This is one that has mostly stayed the same. I added one more category on the bottom here, but this is one that I didn't actually utilize every month, and I wish I had. So I'm gonna try and be a bit better about using this year. But like I said, pretty much the exact same. So basically how this works is that I have a column for each month, obviously January through to December. And so at the end of each month, I will fill out each of these categories within these squares. So we have the total number of books read, the total amount of pages read, how many were physical books, how many were ebooks, audiobooks, library books, how many books did I buy in that month, and what is my current TBR count? Because again, these are all things that I think would be very insightful to keep track of, and I feel like tracking them each month will help me be like, oh my gosh, I've like bought so many books this month, let's try not to buy any next month, you know what I mean? Like hopefully filling it out each month will kind of keep me accountable to those goals that I've set, and then we'll have totals at the very end. Another spread that is new this year is my book club spread. I've got 2 double spreads for this one, so January through June on this one, and then July through December on this one. I'm so excited to see how this one turns out. I think it'll be really, really cute, and also just so fun to look back on. And that is actually the final spread. That is every spread that I've created so far, and hopefully I will utilize every single one of them. I feel like at the end of every year I reflect on what worked and what didn't, and I feel like this will be a new and improved version of what I did last year. So just a quick recap of my 2023 journal. I ended up getting rid of the goals page because I don't really have any reading goals this year, but I kept this and developed it into something new. Kept this pretty similar, kept this pretty similar. This is also pretty much the same this year. Again, pretty much the same. We culled this, kept this, and made it bigger. This is an author backlist page. I got rid of this because I just didn't really keep up with it. I also culled this because it's kind of redundant because I use this instead. So we don't have this, but we still have this, and they both do the same thing. They're both series trackers, so I don't feel like we lost anything there. Kept this and made it bigger. Got rid of this because we kind of combined the two. I ended up getting rid of this. This is a favorite book bracket, so at the end of each month I wrote down my favorite book and then kind of like pitted them against each other to figure out what was my favorite book of the year, but I just didn't really care about this. And again, there were some months where I read so many good books and some months where I just didn't, so it just didn't feel very useful to me. We kept this but changed the format. We kept this but changed the format. Got rid of this. Kept this but made some changes. Kept this pretty much the exact same. Kept this but made it cuter. Kept, but again, made them cuter. And then this is pretty much the exact same. And then the last thing that I have not added into my new journal is just my monthly spreads. So I didn't do one for January last year, but every other month I had a little 2-page spread where I wrote down my TBR and also just logged a few other things as well. And I loved doing this, so I'm definitely going to do this again in 2024. But here are some of the spreads that I did if you want some inspo or you just want to see what they looked like. I think this one is my favorite because I added little gnome stickers and they're so cute. But yeah, that is everything from my 2023 journal and my 2024 journal. This one is also from Amazon if you were wondering. And then lastly, I'll run you through some of my favorite stationery items. For coloring things in, I mostly used my Crayola Super Tips. If you are getting into journaling, I cannot recommend these more. They're affordable, they have a great color selection, and I just like use them so much, so I cannot recommend these enough. I also love these highlighters, the Stabilo Boss Pastel highlighters. I use them for highlighting, but also just like coloring in as well, which you're probably not supposed to, but I just love the colors and I feel like these like never run out. I also love the Zebra mild liners. I also use these when I'm annotating because they don't bleed through pages as easily as some other highlighters do. I have a bunch of colors and again, I absolutely adore these. As for all of the writing that I was doing in my journals, I pretty much always use this exact fine liner. These are called the Uni Pin fine liners, I guess. I don't really know. I have 3 different sizes, the 0.2, 0.1 and the 0.05. And again, these are my absolute favorites. They are my ride or dies. I use the 0.05 the most because I love really thin lines and really thin writing, and this just allows me to do that, but obviously you can get the thickness that you like the best. And then for colored fine liners, these ones are my favorite, mostly because the color range is just so cute. These are the, how do you say that? Statler Tri-Plus Fine Liner. I don't know, I have a bunch of colors and I love these. And I get pretty much all of my supplies either from Officeworks or Amazon. So I'll try and link most of these down below for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me set up this journal and just go through it a bit. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in a comment and I will try my best to get back to you. This was such a requested video, so I'm so happy that I finally was able to get everything in one video and share it with you guys. But I love you all so much and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.